Humans love to label and categorize things. We have a wealth of personality tests and assessments available to us so we can better categorize and label ourselves. We might classify our personality as introverted or extroverted. For example, some of us are logical decision makers whilst some of us use emotions. There are those of us who think in the short term and others who are more long-term focused. These binary definitions give us a sense of identity, comfort, and predictability. However, life is rarely so black and white, and neither are our personalities. I'm sure you are aware that even intelligent people can do stupid things. We are all complex, multifaceted beings with the ability to embody seemingly opposite traits. Cultivating these contradictory characteristics is not only possible, it's one of the most powerful tools for personal growth and success. Steve Jobs was infamous for being the most creative, blue sky thinker detached from a sense of reality, yet he was also the most analytical, nitpicking person to work with who would pay attention to every single detail relentlessly. And this was part of what gave him his genius. History has shown us time and again that individuals who can successfully inhabit two opposing traits often achieve greatness. And I'll argue that you can unlock your own brilliance by breaking out of your definition of your abilities and inhabiting these opposite traits on at least one trait combination. So, hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Psychology Podcast with me, Sam Webster. As always, diving into the science of self-improvement and complementing it with the philosophy of what it means to live a life well lived. In this episode, we will be exploring the paradox of power that arises when individuals combine seemingly contradictory qualities and how cultivating this balance can unlock new levels of personal and professional achievement. I'm going to be giving a rundown of the top different traits in life that we could all learn to culture some opposing qualities to be spikier, more powerful individuals. And it's, of course, worth working on all of these over time, but I really think the best outcome will be to look out for one or two of these examples that I give that really resonates with your personal greatest strengths, and then obsess on really complementing that with the opposite strength to get the most out of you, yourself as an individual. As F. Scott Fitzgerald once said, the test of first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. And I want you to get really, really good at one of these. If you've ever felt like you have some unmet potential, it's likely that this episode is going to give you a very specific idea of an area where you are tripping yourself up and can unlock your next level up into your zone of excellence. If you're into the idea of thinking of your life as a game, you can think of this like building your own special power move into a lethal combination. Yes, it's really cheesy and I kind of hate myself as I say it, but it's also cool and sometimes worth just like channeling these awesome I'm a ninja vibes. I'm going to start with a cool story about George Washington and his greatest opposing traits to show what I mean by the power of going to the absolute maximum on just one of these trait combinations before I present them in the rest of the episode. One of my favorite stories from George Washington is that he was an uncommonly honest and principled person. He always had to do things the correct way. During the war against the British, he would never loot from locals. He punished his own men even for melting a statue in a captured town to make bullets, because he said it was bad faith to deface statues of an opposition leader. He was annoyingly faithful to being an upstanding, God-fearing, law-abiding gentleman. Yet, when it was absolutely needed, he was the master of lying and deceit. At one point, the main American army had virtually no gunpowder at all. And if the British had had the slightest idea of the situation, it would have been the end of the war for them because they simply couldn't have done anything in a battle to protect themselves. Now, George used his uncommon honesty to his advantage, and he lied to literally everyone. He sent out different reports to other American stations, and he even gave speeches to his men about how great everything was going and that they didn't need any extra supplies. They were well provisioned for the war ahead. He also mentioned that as the war was looking like it could be a long one maybe, the army might consider reducing target practice and training that could waste supplies in the long term. But definitely lots of supplies around, nothing to worry about at the moment. And whilst he did this, he also sent messages out to other posts asking to restock the main supplies. He didn't make it sound in the slightest bit urgent or anything. In fact, he sent just one mission to a very well-stocked outpost that was a few days away to hand deliver an initial load of supplies that would cover them for a few weeks. And that guy went out urgently on his mission to restock the main army. Whilst he did this, there were no rumours going around of uncertainty in the men that might bleed through to the British, because there was so much trust that if George said that they definitely had lots of supplies, then of course they had lots of supplies. And within a week, the guy on the mission to restock the main army was back, and they had enough provisions, and they no longer faced certain defeat in any battle. And they were saved by George's ability to be a master liar and deceiver when he needed to, and it worked so well because he was just such a trustworthy human otherwise, which meant that nobody noticed a thing. And how cool was that? It's nuts to think that America exists today because of one man's opposing traits. So because of examples like that, you wouldn't think we'd be so hell-bent on boxing these traits as opposites. But there is a reason for it. Our tendency to view traits as static or one-dimensional is deeply ingrained. Psychologists refer to this as cognitive simplicity. It's a human predisposition to sort people and behaviors into easily understood categories. These categories create a sense of certainty. It reduces the complexity that we have to deal with in managing our daily life. The next stage of thinking is, of course, to realize that you can have elements of both. Psychologist Carl Jung was one of the first people to propose the idea that we exist on more of a continuum rather than falling neatly into one box or another. But the reality is that our personalities are even more fluid than these labels suggest. The boxes, or even a sliding scale, still represent averages of the way we observe these traits in people, but any individual can be quite different. It's worth noting that averages can be very dangerous to take at surface level. It's obvious that no one really has 1.5 children. In the same way, if you're rated as a 50-50 introvert-extrovert, as I am, for example, it's not like you're exactly half introverted and half extroverted. You have times and areas when you can be extroverted and other times when you lean towards introversion, and you can go through periods where you are much more focused on one than the other. It's exactly the same for creativity or a number of other traits. The fixed mindset itself is defined by fixed thinking and allowing ourselves to be described in one box or the other, and that we lack the other one, and it's our problem that it holds us back. Of course, our strengths have a natural weakness, but when examined correctly, that can be one of the most important things for us to overcome. With ADHD, for example, I have a lot of creativity and compulsion to avoid repetition, which means I can curiously explore a range of topics at a very fast pace. But without any organization, the exploration can be a bit of a mess. It can lack coherence or output. And if I just give in to my weaknesses, that wouldn't get me anywhere at all. It's only by facing my demons that I can really bring out the power in my ADHD and make it a strength instead of a weakness. So I think I have clearly demonstrated the point that if you are interested in self-development, you can unlock your full power and potential when you learn to embody both ends of the spectrum that we are told oppose each other. So I'm going to dive into 10 different opposing traits and how they can be complemented before rounding out the episode with more specific approaches of how you could break your weaknesses down to overcome them, and some wider thoughts on the polarities of traits that exist within us when it comes to things like appearances or neurodiversity. So, starting with the first trait combination, and that is knowledge versus open-mindedness. As we get older, we build experience, which is of course invaluable. Deep knowledge is needed to solve complex problems. Yet there's a danger in being too reliant on past experiences. It can lead to cognitive entrenchment, a phenomenon where experts become less likely to question their assumptions. a phenomenon where experts become less likely to question their assumptions. Einstein said that the greatest work of scientists is usually done in their 20s before they have become too cognitively entrenched. But if you can complement experience with being open-minded, that's where you can really unlock brilliance. Great innovators like Steve Jobs are known for having both experience and the ability to think outside the box. They could approach problems with a wealth of knowledge and a willingness to challenge existing norms. Being able to rethink assumptions, even in areas where you are deeply knowledgeable, can really unlock breakthroughs that other people will miss. Kodak was the biggest photo company on the planet. They even patented the first digital cameras. Yet they didn't pursue them because they were entrenched in the business of selling camera film, and they weren't open-minded to the innovation that they could have been leading. Adam Grant, in his book Think Again, noted that people who question their own assumptions are much more likely to build creative solutions. And after all, even experts once thought the earth was flat. A nice saying is that I like to keep an open mind, but not so open that my brains fall out. So if you think open-minded is your skill here, you want to be balancing that with knowledge and experience. Next, we have the combination of empathy and assertiveness, and this can result in very powerful and compassionate leadership. Empathy and assertiveness are often viewed as very opposing traits. Empathy involves understanding, sharing the feelings of others, and caring about them, whilst assertiveness requires standing up for oneself and one's goals. Yet leaders who possess both traits are often the most effective. Gandhi, for example, was an insanely empathetic individual. He understood the people's problems and the goals of those people in power. Yet he was incredibly assertive and willing to starve himself to death to get his own way. Empathetic leaders can create environments where people feel both heard, valued, and understood. This fosters trust and collaboration, which is essential for any team. However, without assertiveness, empathy can be mistaken for weakness. A leader must have the ability to set boundaries and make difficult decisions and push a team towards challenging goals. Combining the two creates compassionate yet decisive leadership. Those who can embody both traits earn respect and loyalty as they strike the right balance between caring for their employees or followers whilst also driving them towards success. Next, we have time sensitivity. Here I'm talking about the balance between optimizing your time versus being completely immersed in the present. I think this is a hugely powerful combination for anyone when it comes to happiness. On the one hand, being time sensitive, focused on productivity, is essential for achieving one's goals. The modern world demands efficiency. Unnecessary tasks like meetings, distractions can easily lead to burnout or just general mediocrity. Successful individuals are the experts at eliminating wasteful activities, prioritizing their efforts to get the most out of themselves. However, it's equally important to know when to let go of time constraints in our desire to optimize and to be fully present and perhaps even waste time. When you're hanging out with your family or friends or calling your mother, you shouldn't be checking your watch and worrying about your product. In moments spent with family or friends, when you're calling your grandma, you should be all in. You shouldn't be checking your watch or worrying about productivity. You need to be able to fully switch off from the time-focused mindset, and that will truly help you foster much deeper relationships and maintain a healthier work-life balance. And learning to toggle between urgency and efficiency into being present and carefree is crucial. When we are too fixated on productivity, it really diminishes our ability to enjoy life's moments. And what is the point of being so damn productive if you can't enjoy what you're working for? Of course, if you lack urgency, that will derail any professional progress that you're making, but cultivating both traits at the same time gives you the flexibility to be productive when necessary and present when it really matters. And on a completely related note, we have working hard and playing hard. Our modern culture does really celebrate people who push themselves to the limit, and hard work is crucial for success. Nothing is really easy. But knowing when to step back and how to recharge is just as important and is actually essential if you do want to work hard. Those who can both work hard and relax hard are able to maintain very high productivity without burning out. It's those times when we step away from work that allows us to do creative problem solving and to rejuvenate mental and physical energy. If you're just relying on working as hard as possible, that really starts to diminish your returns. And if you're working 12-hour days, you might find that the last 6 hours of work, you're getting barely anything done. You're actually being very unproductive. When you build the capacity to work intensely and relax intensely, that creates a very sustainable rhythm that leads to longer-term success. Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, was notorious for his very intense work ethic, yet would spend hours fully engaged in leisure like roller hockey, swimming, and it's the same for Mr. Beast. He has one of the most insane work ethics of anyone on the planet, yet he'll also play games for multiple days at a time when he needs a rest. The point here is to not waste time in the middle of being productive or unproductive, where you're doing pointless sort of work like checking your email all the time and just showing up but not doing very much. And on another completely related note on the subject of time, we have patience and urgency, which seem like they're on opposite ends of the spectrum, but a balance between the two is essential. Urgency, as we've mentioned, drives immediate action, and without it, we can be lazy and do nothing. But patience allows for steady development of ideas over time without expecting fast results or rushing our goals. Knowing when to apply each trait is really key to maintaining your productivity and progress without sacrificing on quality. If you want relationships, you need some urgency to go into the dating game or even to improve aspects of yourself. But if you expect everything to be perfect straight away, you'll drop all your relationships the first setback you have before the relationship has even had a chance. If you want to run a podcast, for example, you have to have the urgency to meet your release deadlines, but you need to have the patience for the fact that podcasts in general grow very slowly. If you want to build wealth, you should have some urgency to be putting money into your savings every week or month, but you should have the patience for them to turn into something meaningful over the span of decades and not expect to be rich next month or be annoyed at your investing portfolio when it goes down, because that's what happens with the stock market. These days, people are increasingly in a rush. People want to get rich by next month, they want to be fit by next week, and they want to be ecstatically happy right now. But we forget that all of these things take hard work and patience to get there. Urgency is a hugely powerful tool when harnessed correctly and complemented with patience. But instead, most of us are definitely being pushed towards the urgency end of things, and urgency by itself is basically just stress. And that's one of the reasons why we have such a huge anxiety problem, because we have too much stress without any balancing patience and relaxation. And now we'll go on to the next point, which is going to be the last one on time, I promise. And the reason I'm having such a time focus is that if you think about it, every single decision you make in your life is technically a question about how you use your time as you navigate the course of your life. So it does make sense to have a lot of mental models around time, as it is the source of many people's problems. So the final point here is short-term actions versus long-term vision. Many founders and entrepreneurs operate under constant pressure and urgency, as we've been speaking about. They have their immediate needs of survival. In the startup world, companies exist in a huge state of urgency. However, the most successful founders are those that can cultivate a long-term vision. They aren't just focused on their next quarter, they're thinking about the next decade. The ability to operate on both a short-term and long-term time frame creates what can be called a paradox of genius. Founders like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are examples of leaders who have the balance of short-term action with a very visionary long-term perspective on the future. They can take very quick, decisive actions to solve their immediate problems whilst really keeping their eyes focused on the long-term horizon ahead of them. That allows them to build companies that endure and grow over the next 10 or even 50 years. Cultivating this paradox within yourself can help you excel in both the present without losing sight of the larger picture. And it's completely the same for personal satisfaction. The Power of Now is a brilliant book reminding us to relentlessly live in the moment, experiencing the present, being one with ourselves, because living in the past is how we get depressed, and living in the future is how we get stressed and anxious. But you do need to combine your ability to live in the present with a seriously long-term thinking of what you wish your present moments to be like over the next 30 years, and to not put off your goals or let short-term urgent needs get in the way of your real progress. And on the subject of progress, I think we're about halfway, so now is a good time for an advert break. And a reminder that if you upgrade to the premium subscription, you won't need to hear these, but do please stay tuned, where we will be cracking into the other opposing traits that we can have within ourselves, and then a framework of how to actually work on them, and some other ideas on complementing the natural strengths that lie within us. Right, moving forwards, we have been talking a bit about innovation, and there is a thing called the innovation engine that's about both creativity and analytical thinking. Creativity is often considered with the ability to think outside of the box and come up with novel ideas. Analytical thinking, on the other hand, involves breaking down problems methodically and evaluating them based on data and logic. And these traits can be very at odds with each other. It can be said that creativity is like a spark and analytical thinking is like a fire extinguisher. But when combined, they are the driving force behind innovation. After all, it was man's ability to control and contain fire that led to so many of our advances, like being able to create electricity, different metals, car engines, etc. Great entrepreneurs, innovators, and change makers are often characterized by their ability to dream very big whilst remaining brutally critical of their own ideas. They can switch between imagining new possibilities and then rigorously assessing whether those possibilities are feasible and how to make them better. Einstein would conduct radically creative thought experiments like riding a beam of light, and he would pair that with an ability to analyze these concepts with mathematical and physical scrutiny. And there's a very similar pairing in the business world for product founders and creators. And this is the combination of high belief and high criticality. There's this great quote, which sounds like a Paul Graham quote, but I don't know who wrote it. And it says, great product people must believe in their product absolutely and be very critical of it at the same time. And you'll find that people that make the most amazing products are filled with an abundance of positive faith in their product and are ruthlessly self-critical. They have enough belief to fully commit themselves to their creative endeavor. At the same time, they have the strength of character to see exactly how their product is really quite lousy and could be so much better when worked upon. And it's the same for writing. To create a fantastic book, you have to have a huge belief in the idea that you're writing about, the strength of the story, but you also need to be able to scrutinize every single line and create several drafts, accepting that everything you've written so far is actually terrible. Steve Jobs, as I mentioned in the introduction, is a great example of someone who's both very creative and had very high belief in his ideas and products, but was hugely critical and analytical about them. He had this amazing creative vision that could dream up products that the world had never seen before and was notoriously exact about the execution and needed every detail to be perfect. Next, we have a really brilliant opposing combination, that is stubbornness and flexibility. Stubbornness is the ability to stay focused on your goal or idea and resist all the naysayers. It gives us resilience to keep going when the world says that we are mad. Whilst flexibility is the willingness to adapt to all the changing circumstances, take on all the feedback, and completely go with the flow instead of forging our own path. Now, whilst stubbornness often involves a steadfast focus on a singular goal, flexibility requires the openness to modify one's approach when needed. In today's rapidly changing world, both traits are essential for success. Jeff Bezos, for example, is famous for having a bulldog mentality of stubbornness and achieving a singular mission tied to his long-term vision, but he's completely flexible on the details of how to get there and to change his short-term actions. He'll have very high conviction on trying an idea or product, but happily cancel it or change strategy if it isn't working. It's so easy for us to forget that most people face multiple failures before achieving success. Their stubbornness and resilience kept them moving forwards, but it's their flexibility and ability to adapt and pivot and take on feedback that ultimately led them to their breakthroughs. Mr. Beast started YouTubing by streaming himself playing computer games. He remained stubbornly focused on achieving success on YouTube, but very flexible on what it was that he created. In fact, even Adolf Hitler here could be an example. He tried to take control of the German government through a military coup, and he failed. So he changed strategy, he focused on winning the German people over, and a few years later, he achieved being voted into parliament through a legal election, which is kind of mind-boggling. And who knows what the world would have been like if he had been much less stubborn in some of his other plans, like the Holocaust and invading Russia. If he'd gone much slower on his ambitions, he could have genuinely achieved them sequentially, which is kind of terrifying to realize, but worth noting the power of being able to hold such opposing traits together, along with things like having patience instead of trying to rushing them all at once. Obviously, a terrible human being and not good goals to have, but some interesting lessons for ourselves here. Next, we have self-confidence and humility, which gives us a very grounded ambition. Self-confidence helps us believe in our abilities, take on challenges, and pursue very ambitious goals. Humility, on the other hand, keeps us very grounded, reminds us that we don't have all the answers and that we can learn from others. In combination, these traits foster a balanced mindset that will lead us to continuous growth. Too much self-confidence without humility just results in arrogance, unwillingness to adapt or take feedback. Conversely, humility without self-confidence can lead to self-doubt and missed opportunities. It's the successful individuals who strike a balance between the two, maintaining their confidence to take bold steps while staying humble enough to keep learning along the way. Very much a growth mindset. Finally, we have the art of balancing humor and seriousness. Humor lightens the mood, strengthens relationships, fosters resilience, especially in difficult times. Yet, too much humor can be seen as frivolous and unserious. Being serious can be great because you actually work with dedication and you approach what you're doing reliably. No one wants to invest in a business where the entrepreneur doesn't take the business seriously. And just as humor is essential for relationships, no one wants to be in a relationship with someone that doesn't take their relationship seriously. But let's say you're in a relationship, you don't want someone who's so serious that they're constantly willing to die for your endless happiness that they never have time to relax and make a joke, because they're pretty stifling and weird to spend time with. Striking a balance between humor and seriousness can enhance both personal and professional relationships. In fact, research shows that humor can really improve our communication. It really helps boost our own creativity and the retention of information. Perhaps the very stupid example I just gave of someone so serious they're willing to die for your happiness that they can never make a joke made the point I was making fall into your brain as an idea so much more clearly than just saying the words you should balance humor and seriousness. Hence, I improved my communication by using both. You'll really find the best communicators on the planet can blend both serious content with a touch of humor, which makes their messages both impactful and memorable. I remember researching all the top TED Talks before I gave my TED Talk, and you'll find that nearly all of the top 10 viewed TED Talks in history have a similar laugh per minute score as a stand-up comedian. And yet, even though you didn't go to the TED Talk to hear jokes, you went to a TED Talk to learn information. But what they did is they blended information with humor the entire way through, which made the whole talk so much more impactful, educational, and just enjoyable to watch. Okay, so that's the end of the list for now, but I will give you some more ideas of different traits that we might naturally have within us and how to work with those. But firstly, I want to talk about some strategies of how to work with creating some opposing strengths. Firstly, it is worth remembering that you don't have to fix every single weakness that is paired to a respective strength. There's a reason that we work in teams and collaborate. Very creative entrepreneurs often have a business partner or COO who manages the details and execution. Just because you have a strength doesn't mean you have to focus on its weakness. And some things really aren't for us. For example, I'm great at maths. I love making things add up. I really enjoy doing my own personal accounts. But when I was young and I didn't know what I should be doing with my life, I did work experience at an accountancy because when I was in the job planning class, it matched all my apparent skills. Now, I was supposed to be doing work experience for a whole week and I lasted 1.5 days before concluding I really did not want to become an accountant. Because it turns out I have some weaknesses when it comes to sitting down at a screen all day long and adding up numbers. Who'd have thought? But it turns out that is a weakness I didn't need to work on. You only need to find one strength that is really worth you complementing its weakness to make a power combination. You don't have to complement all your strengths and their respective weaknesses. Now, for some of us, we might have a pretty obvious strength. Like for me, I have ADHD, so I have endless ideas. I love researching and learning stuff and exploring widely and wildly. But importantly, I don't need to organize my entire life to complement this strength. I need to find an area where I can unleash creative curiosity, but harness it into a format with guardrails and systems that I can follow. That for me has ended up being the podcast. As I get better at organizing myself, that could grow into things like YouTube and a regular newsletter, maybe even courses and books, but one step at a time. To work out what you should focus on, I would consider doing a strengths profile test. Also, you can ask friends and colleagues for their feedback on when they think you perform at your best, and otherwise do lots of mind maps. Firstly, start by plotting all the things you find easy and natural to do a good job of, and all the things that you really struggle with in life, and try to identify all your main strengths and weaknesses. And after you've done that, you can use the list of pairs from this episode to analyze some of the themes. Next, you want to take on one individual strength at a time and mind map what the weaknesses are associated with that strength and the things that you might do to combat that. And after you've done that, collect all the different things you've come up with and try to collect them into different themes of areas to work on. For me, with my ADHD, I found I have 3 main areas of weaknesses that I can work on. Firstly, there's just simple procrastination habits, like the apps on my phone or websites that I'll check as a ritual before I even do any work. Then there's my general unorganized behavior, messy plans, messy notes, which means that my next task is always very unobvious and unspecific and leads to me trying to make decisions and actions all at the same time, which doesn't work. And then finally, I have the area of my just general routines, like working on having a sensible bedtime, starting the day with something that balances me, so not looking at my phone, but instead doing some yoga and then a plan for the day, making sure I know when I'm going to exercise, when my meetings are, that I've cleaned my work environment, etc. And having all of those things obvious and in front of me, because I'd mapped them all out, made it very easy to see where I'm weak and made it much more fun to improve on them when I have a checklist of obvious things that I can action and I can see how it's helping me. Whatever it might be for you that you want to focus on, these could be very different things, but a mind map can be a brilliant way to get a lot of ideas down, and don't be afraid to ask for help from friends or even ChatGPT for advice, or of course a therapist. Lastly, I would be prepared to try different experiences and go very widely. I found YouTubing, for example, super fun. I loved it, but it took me so much time compared to podcasting, which still takes me a lot of time, but the YouTubing wasn't manageable to actually have any output. Similarly, being creative on social media, really fun, but also absolute chaos for me. Whereas podcasting has hit the line of something that's just about manageable, even if I end up writing and recording things right at the last minute, such as right now, 3 hours after I was supposed to release the episode. But hey, don't always get it right. Now for you, perhaps you want to get better at public speaking because you have all the other qualities for leadership, but struggle with an audience. Now, you might want to do stand-up comedy classes, or you might hate that. Maybe trying debating could be a really fun way for you to help you work on that skill instead. Or of course, just standard speech giving practice. But maybe you should even try starting a YouTube or a podcast. I don't know. The point is there are several ways to work on a weakness, and just trying one and having it fail doesn't mean that you can't fix the weakness. I hated accounting, for example, which was sitting down with a screen playing with numbers all day, but I loved programming, which from an outside perspective looks very similar, but internally felt very different. You might hate running, but you could love cycling. And if you wanted to get fit, you just have to try lots of different things and find something you enjoy. And I'm willing to bet that with most weaknesses, there is something that you could enjoy that would help you work on it. And that's the point of doing these mind maps, to come up with lots of ideas of things you can try, instead of just taking the one standard route, failing and deciding it's not for you. Now, I could certainly expand upon how to change our self-definitions and habits and some deep dives on transforming our skills over 3 to 6 months, but I will leave that for another episode in the future. And I do have a few related roundup ideas I'd really like to share on the theme of this episode that could give you some extra inspiration. One is on appearances. I think we all know that women can be judged on appearance, and that naturally society favors good-looking, tall men for their leaders. But whatever appearance you have comes with a set of judgments from society, because we like putting things into boxes and labeling them. But it can be incredibly powerful for you as an individual to complement the judgments that are going to come at you and the natural weakness associated by working against what would be the expected weakness. For example, if you're a big, muscly guy, the assumption is that you're a meathead who is unemotional. If you can learn to talk about your emotions, that is a power move that will make you a very interesting person. Because people will just want to learn more about you because you're so unexpected. If, say, you are a good-looking blonde woman, the assumption might be that you're ditzy and dumb. If you can learn to code or become a lawyer, like in Legally Blonde, or just get a PhD in anything, that is a power move that makes you stand out from your expectations. And in fact, for any woman, if you learn to code, it's just a power move because there is such a lack of female coders in the workplace that you are instantly snapped up. But who knows how long the job is going to last of being a coder. So the point is, whatever society says about you, see if you can do the opposite. Another thought on the theme of powerful combinations is personality disorders and neurodiversity. They are often the result of what society says is a negative combination, but can be utilized to be very powerful. So if you look at borderline personality disorder, for example, that's a combination of fear of abandonment and the fear of intimacy, which can make it very hard to have relationships. But if you can learn to harness these qualities, you can be one of the most interesting, loyal, and loving people to be in a relationship with. Let's take narcissism. That's the fear of being found out as not perfect, yet also wanting to be the center of attention. The issue is that deeply inside yourself, you feel a flaw, that you aren't perfect, that you aren't enough. The last thing you'd want to be is at the center of attention for your flaws. Again, these traits can make it very difficult for you. But if you can learn to just take the edges off the weaknesses, that can make you a brilliant entrepreneur who is naturally gifted at getting people engaged in your product and your ideas. And you can also complement that with the analytical detail to focus on the weaknesses, as long as you can culture that humility to ask for feedback and not succumb to your weakness of needing to be perfect straight away. ADHD, for me, for example, is a fear of repetition and slowness, conflicted by a fear of the unknown. And I never used to believe that. I loved exploring and doing scary unknown things. So how could I be afraid of the unknown? It's taken years for me to realize how slow I am at actually making progress on new things, because I need processes in place to get anything done. Otherwise, I'll immediately resort to procrastination. And that's because I have all these big, unknown, unwieldy tasks in front of me, because I'll have failed to do anything like planning for them, because that feels like moving slowly and is boring. But when you can learn to make plans, mind map, get away from your procrastination habits, you can unlock the power of your creativity. So if you are on the neurodiversity spectrum, or you resonate with any personality disorder, that is where your strengths and weaknesses, fears and desires don't lie in the natural scale between each other according to the average human. And in fact, they can heavily oppose each other in a detrimental way. And that makes it very easy to see these traits as just weaknesses. But when harnessed correctly, they can be a really useful tool that actually drives our success. So concluding this all, life is not about choosing one trait over another trait, but about mastering the balance between seemingly opposite characteristics. And in fact, welcoming these unbalances. The ability to embody both sides of a spectrum, creativity and logic, urgency and patience, empathy and assertiveness. Doing this can unlock very new levels of achievement and fulfillment for us. It can drive us to be more adaptable, innovative, and successful at navigating the complexities of life on both the personal and professional levels. So I hope you've learned that you don't need to fight the paradoxes within yourself. You can truly embrace them and harness them over time in a graceful way that works for you. Your greatest strength truly lies in the combination of these opposing traits that, instead of cancelling each other out, can be added on top of each other to create your own lethal power move combination. If this episode has helped you at all, do please drop me a hot review or share it with a friend that you think could be an absolute monster at something. Tell them what you think their greatest strength is. And that's such a nice thing to do, and I'm sure they'll do it back for you. If you want to join the premium membership, you can get ad-free listening, ask as many questions as you like. Remember, life is a game. You don't need to play by other people's rules. Do it your own way. Experiment widely and wildly. Lean into things that feel good and lean into things that feel scary. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
Studies show we need time for information to sink in, so I'm going to give you a 5-second pause, silence, to reflect on one idea from the show before you jump back into your busy life. Ready and go.